there's only so much money we'll be able to generate from TV rights. So what about the other revenues around the match day that we can actually generate from the fans? Turning up earlier, leaving later, giving them a great time while they're there, making them want to come back, making them want to bring their kids back, making them want to bring back family and friends to actually increase our audience and increase our fan base. These are the opportunities that we've got in English football. In North America, it's bread and butter. They do it so well all the time. Formula One, fantastic. They do a wonderful job around the race itself to build up the event and make people spend money. We've got a lot to learn in English football to make that happen more.
A part of that is probably because of the traditional English fan, which hasn't always been one of the great ambassadors of England. I mean, you've got these issues with the police trying to get visiting fans to leave the venue. The police aren't going to want fans to hang around necessarily after a venue. So is that perhaps a danger of being too ambitious there and not being realistic about football, or is football changing as a sport?
I think football's changing. I'm pleased to say football in England is changing. There is very few occasions in this era where we have issues inside our stadium between rival fans. I mentioned earlier that our club has tried to break the mould in terms of how we treat the fan experience. Well, we're actually one of those clubs that invite visiting fans to have a drink with our fans after the game. We actually invite them into our home areas and say, share a beer, talk about the game, win, lose or draw. This is a football match, it's not a war. Come and enjoy yourselves and mix with people that actually are like-minded. How many times do we try and get like-minded audiences in the same room so they can share ideas and enjoy each other's company? Well, football's the ultimate. Here they are, and football's the ultimate, because football fans will talk about football literally for hours and hours and hours if you let them. And anyone who's not a football fan in the room, who's perhaps married to someone who is, you'll know what that's like. But at our stadium, we do encourage it. And you know what? In 8 seasons since we opened the new stadium, since we built the new stadium, we haven't experienced any problems. I'll give you an example of why. When visiting fans turn up at our stadium, traditionally in England, the visiting fans are made to feel as unwelcome as possible. We put them in the worst possible viewing position. We try and not have any running water in case they want to wash their hands or anything. We give them the worst food and the warmest beer. That's traditionally been the mindset of an English football club towards visiting fans. Our view when we built the stadium 8 years ago was let's be a bit different. So if Manchester United are visiting Brighton, we like their end of the stadium red. We serve the beer in their concourses that they would drink in Manchester. We supply the pies, the food that they would eat in Manchester on their concourses. We sell their merchandise, not ours. We show their goal highlights on the screens, not ours. And why do we do that? Well, for 3 reasons. First of all, it makes those people feel welcome. If they feel welcome, they're more likely to spend more money. And if they're spending more money and feel welcome, they're less likely to cause any problems with our fans or our staff. And so everyone goes home at the end of the day, both home and away fans, having had a great experience. And that has stood the test of time for us. 8 seasons now. We've now got the highest revenue per head of any Premier League club or any Championship club. That's meaning more fans spend more money with us on a match day per head than any other club in the top 2 divisions. And we have less damage to our stadium and therefore a lower cost of maintaining that stadium. So to me, it's not just about creating a great fan experience. It makes good business sense to actually treat people properly.
Interesting. We heard from Arsenal this morning in terms of digital strategy. What are you doing at Brighton?
Well, digital is really important to us for lots of reasons. First of all, we haven't got the profile that the big clubs have got, so we need to help build it, and digital is a very key way of doing that. Secondly, we don't have the biggest stars. We have some stars, some good players, international players, but they're not the biggest stars. So therefore, they're more accessible to us and our media teams in terms of using digital media to create experiences for fans. And fan engagement, I think, using the athletes is something, again, football clubs have traditionally moved away from. We've tried to make it, in some cases, as difficult as possible for the fans and the athletes to come together. We try and reverse that. We try and bring the fans and athletes as close as we can. Digital is a part of that. Live experiences in the training ground, in the stadium, are also part of that. And for us, because we lost many generations of fans during the more difficult years for the club, we've got a specific objective of bringing back younger fans to the club. So one of the things that we do, every 7-year-old in Brighton, if they register with us, they get a free replica shirt. Why? Because our research showed that children at 7 years of age make the decision to support one football club for the rest of their life. So it makes sense for us, for every 7-year-old in our city, to be wearing our shirt when they make that decision. I don't think it's an exact science. I think there could be 6, there might be 8. But for us, it's really important to give ourselves the best chance of that kid not supporting Manchester United or, God forbid, Arsenal or one of the other big clubs. I'm a Spurs fan, so I have to have a little bit of Arsenal there. Sorry, John, if you're in the audience. But the most important thing is that we give those kids an opportunity to come to games, to engage with the club, to experience football, to get something into their minds that is perhaps going to stay with them for a lifetime. If that costs me at trade price £20 to put a shirt on their back, and I've got a fan for 50, 60, 70 years, wow, that's pretty good business. That's pretty good marketing recruitment cost by anyone's standard.
Really interesting. And so your biggest asset are the players. Social media, we've talked a lot about, again, this morning. Players have massive social media followings. How well can you coordinate what the players are doing on social media? I know it's the manager's nightmare sometimes what players are putting out there. How can you make sure that they're working as ambassadors for the club and not perhaps a danger to the message of the club?
Sure. I think social media, a bit like the use of social media in society, is a blessing and a curse when it comes to sport. If I look at our players' use of social media, they tend to use it when they're most emotional. What a nightmare that is. Any of you that work in sport, emotional athletes on social media, it's bad news, it's a terrible recipe. So we try and train them as best we can to not use social media in the hour leading up to a game, certainly not use it in the hour after a game, because that's when emotions are really high. You've won, you boast, you lose, you curse, everything is wrong about the hour after the game. But we do want them to use it when, for example, they're engaging with fans positively. We do want them to use it when they're engaging with the community positively. We do want them to use it when they're using their American Express card positively. There's lots of reasons why we would want athletes to use social media. And of course we want them to come across as human beings as well. There's this great thing about putting athletes on a pedestal and somehow they're not human. And then when they do something that is human, they make a mistake, they get into their car, drive too fast, or they get into their car after they've had a drink. They shouldn't do any of those things, but because they're human, they do it. But for some reason with athletes, the outcome of that is much, much worse than it would be for any of us, because they're expected to be role models, and of course they are role models. So we try and educate that social media is positive as well as it's negative. It can be negative as well as positive. In the club's point of view, it gives us an opportunity again to reach another audience, a different audience, a younger audience. And if we do our fan profiles, so many of our younger fans only use social media that older people don't, and vice versa. So we have to have a number of strategies to work across a number of platforms to reach the widest possible audience.
As a CEO, how do you control that? Not very easily. You work with the players' agents, presumably.
Every night I say a prayer, James, is the way I control it. And it's not always successful, is the answer. I try and stay off of social media myself, not because I'm afraid of it or because I don't believe in it, but because it's very easy, I think, as a chief executive of a club to engage on every single issue with every single fan and never do anything else. So, what I try and do is I answer every single email I receive. I make sure that I try and personalise every communication I have with fans as far as I can, so that I stay in touch with what the issues are, but not get too bogged down in social media. I think one of the problems with social media is that an issue that is actually quite small and narrow for a relatively small number of people can become very, very large in your mind if you follow the issue through the eyes of a small number of people. Equally, big issues can attract very extreme views if you follow the big issues on social media as well. So we try and take a step back. Our media team monitor it very carefully. We try and use it as best we can. But in terms of controlling it, I'm not sure there is a way.
Something that really stood out for the PwC research this morning was talking television sports rights not going up, or maybe going up only by 2 or 3% in future years. You've seen that already in the United Kingdom with the Sky deal and BT deal for the next Premier League contract actually going down a little bit. Money will get made up from international rights, but in terms of domestic leagues, it's going to go down. Where do you see football rights going in the next 5-10 years?
Well, I think live content is always going to be in huge demand, and particularly top-level live content. I heard the league here earlier, they've got a fantastic product, but it's still nowhere near the Premier League's product globally. So Premier League contents are significantly in demand, significantly high value. But the way people are consuming them is changing, there's no doubt about that. I've only got to look at my own kids watching a live TV match and doing something else on an iPad, doing something else on an iPhone, watching the game, looking at the iPad, looking at the iPad. It drives me crazy. I just want to throw those devices out of the room, because for me, watching the match on the big screen is all important. But we saw from those statistics, it's not that's not the way that young people will consume the game. So the way those rights are going to be sold in the future is definitely going to change. Where they're sold in the future is changing all the time. More and more markets are opening up. More and more markets are educating their consumers and their populations to love football. And we're lucky that 4 billion people across the world watch the Premier League every single year. 4 billion people. It's an incredible product. But we've also got to recognise that the way people consume the product is changing. So I expect digital content and the way we consume it, whether it's in clip form, whether it's in edited highlight form, whether it's in near live form, as live form, actually live form, is all going to change. And it's all going to keep changing, I think, for many, many years to come.
For the latest round of deals, there was a lot of talk in the UK about Amazon and Facebook, then Amazon did come in with an unbelievably low bid to get a handful of matches. Are we talking now over hyping the Amazons and the Facebooks and co of this world and what they could give to you as a football club?
No, I don't think so, because I think, again, they want live content. They want to be able to attract a certain audience to their platform so that they can either sell them other things or engage them in different ways. So live sport, particularly the best live sport, is going to be in demand for them. And I think there's probably organisations out there we've never heard of that will start to compete for live rights in the future. And I think as the sport as entertainment medium starts to evolve and change, I mentioned earlier the events around the stadium before and after matches. We heard earlier about things that could go on inside the stadium during the match. And again, whether it's esports, whether it's drones, racing at half time, or dropping food and drinking to people in the stadium. I mean, things are going to change for sure. And any of us that have been in football for 20 odd years think that the way it is now and the way it was 20 years ago is going to be the way it is in 20 years. Are kidding themselves. It's going to change massively. And that's why I'm encouraged by so many young people now studying football industries, MBAs, getting themselves better educated in sports marketing, understanding sports law and media rights, because the youngsters that are coming out of university now are going to be running a very, very different sports industry to the one that I'm part of at the moment. And they all need different skills, they need different mindsets, they'll need to understand consumers in a very, very different way to the way I do. And my classic marketing training of 25, 30 years ago may well be redundant in 25 years' time, because the world, I think, in our industry is changing that much.
You mentioned esports, quite scary to many people of our generation, because people 20 years younger than us are much more switched on, which I guess as a CEO you don't necessarily want people 20 years younger than you know more than you do.
Oh, they do, don't worry about it.
It's something we all have to face. That is a reality. But how does a club like Brighton bring in esports and work effectively with esports?
Well, I think you've got two choices, haven't you? You either run a mile from something you don't understand and you're a little bit scared, or you embrace it. So we're trying to embrace it. We're just in the process of recruiting our first e-gamer to represent our club in competitions around the UK and around Europe and ultimately across the world. We're taking part in the E-Premier League, which is a live gaming event based on a simulated Premier League next season, which the Premier League themselves are running. And in January we're hosting at our stadium a massive Fortnite event. And when I told the board about this, they looked a bit confused, and I had to explain this is probably the best-selling game in the world at the moment. There's a whole bunch of kids that are going to come and play this game on our big screens, and they're going to have an audience of people watching them play the game on the big screen. And my board looked even more confused at the end of my explanation as they did at the beginning. But that's the reality, and we've got to embrace esports, and we've got to embrace esports across the spectrum, either as well as from a brand point of view, competitive point of view, but also from an experiential point of view when it comes to our facilities being used for other e-gamers to bring their content to our stadium. And the problem with football stadiums is that they're not in use for so much of the year. And it breaks my heart to see a beautiful stadium like ours empty 300 days a year. If we can actually fill that stadium with content that doesn't damage the grass, what a great thing for us to have. our groundsman would rather we didn't play football on our grass, let alone e-games. But this is a really important thing for us to, again, evolve the business, change the nature of what we're doing, and also change the industry in some way. And we're all for it.
Where do you think, in terms of a club like yours, I mean, how far can esports go? I mean, are we going to be talking about the Brighton esports team in 20 years' time rather than the Brighton actual real players? I mean, how far do you think it can go?
Personally, as a traditionalist, I would hope not, but I think that we've got to be realistic that the growth of esports is so exponential, albeit from a low base, let's not forget that anything could happen. There are 70, 80,000 people in South Korea watching kids gaming. I mean, that's incredible. To me, that blows my mind. But that's the reality, and it's a reality now. So if that catches on across the rest of the world, then we could be looking at a very different Formula One, or a very different Premier League, or a very different Wimbledon tennis in 25 years' time, perhaps even in 10 years' time. So we've got to keep our eyes and our wits open. I don't think live competitive sport between human beings is ever going to go away, but I think it could be complemented by virtual sports, that people that play those virtual sports become as big icons as the stars of the sports themselves. And that's a kind of a frightening thought in some ways.
I'm going to open this up, by the way, for questions at the moment, so if you've got a question, do have a think. Does it worry you, in terms of esports, that the bigger esports become, the greater the role models have influence, actually the less physically active our kids are all going to be?
It does. I mean, I was at a conference last year in New York, and I met one of the world's best paid e-gamers, and he was sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. And it kind of worried me, that there was this sort of strange sort of collaboration of people being inactive, being sponsored by a major donut provider. Having said that, getting kids engaged in sport in whatever form, that's got to be something we take seriously. So if one kid in the world is engaged in real sport because they were switched on by a game of sport on a computer screen, and they go on to play the actual sport, then that's not such a bad thing. And if it's actually those areas that are influencing kids, esports are influencing kids to play real sports, then we shouldn't dismiss it completely. But I do think we've got to be careful that we're not making more counter potatoes than we've got already, because that would worry me and that would concern me. As someone that's always been lucky enough to be involved with sport, both personally and professionally, that would actually break my heart. So I think we do have to make sure there's a balance there.
We've got a fair few couch potatoes already. One final question, a slightly different topic, which is certainly relevant to those who follow what goes on in the United Kingdom in this audience. You're on the FA Council. You used to work, as you said, for the Football Association. The big issue the last few months has been the potential sale of Wembley Stadium. For those of you who don't know, an offer came in earlier this year for Wembley Stadium to be purchased for about £600 million. That's now been scrapped because there wasn't enough support in the FA Council for the sale to take place. What was your view? What is your view? What do you think should happen to Wembley Stadium?
Well, I was more positive about the sale for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think there's a real issue in our country of funding grassroots, and allied to the conversation we've just had about getting kids to be more active, there's nothing that's going to stop them being active and not being able to find a football pitch to play football more. So, for me, the lack of funding of grassroots sport in England that could have been facilitated by selling a stadium that the FA doesn't need to own, could still use, can still control, can still call the home of English football, but doesn't need to actually own it. If that could have generated anywhere between £600 million and £1 billion that could have then been wisely, carefully and sustainably invested in grassroots football, I was in favour. From the point of view of owning a stadium, I think there's only 3 of the top FIFA 30 football-playing nations that own their own national stadium. So I don't believe that we have to own our own stadium. And some of England's best moments, winning the World Cup in 1966, getting to the semi-finals of Euro 96, have been at Wembley when it wasn't owned by the FA. So again, I don't believe that the notion that Wembley is the heart and soul of the FA either. So for me, I was a bit more positive about it. There were, of course, a lot of details to be worked on. There were a lot of things to be thought about in terms of how the money would be invested, who would actually be in charge of that investment, how long could sustainably the game benefit from that investment. But for me, it's an opportunity missed rather than an opportunity lost. an opportunity that we swerve.
It's more than enough from me. And let's give you a chance. I've got a question towards the back there.
Yes, hello. I was interested in knowing what was your squad management strategy in terms of the budget you spend on transferring in players, transferring out, and if you end up ranking at the highest level in the EPL, which increases the envelope, does this change your strategy? Do you focus on youth, South American players with the hope of selling them later at the extra value or so on?
Yeah. Well, first of all, our budget for players is probably amongst the 4 lowest in the Premier League. So last season we finished 15th, which was our first season in the Premier League. We're currently sitting 12th. And if we're doing that with the 4th lowest budget, it's a real credit to our player recruitment team on the work they're doing to get us great value for the money that we're spending. We're also spending £5 million a year in our academy, and our future really is in the hands of that academy, because we're never going to be able to compete with the biggest 10, 12, 14 clubs in the Premier League on player budgets in the traditional sense, transfer fees and salaries. So we have to develop our own young players. And the investment in the academy is designed to do that. And it's a 3-way bet, if you like. First of all, we're trying to develop players for our first team. If they're not good enough for our first team, we've got an opportunity to sell them to other clubs at lower levels to recoup some of our investment. And thirdly, if they're not going to make a career in football, we might still be investing in someone that could make a career in football as a coach, as a scout, as someone who is involved in the game in the way that I am, wearing a suit every day. It's an investment really in our football club's future at lots of different levels. We've also got our women's team that are now playing at the highest level. We've got a women's academy as well as a boys' academy. Women's sport is really important to us as well. 50% of the population are female. Why wouldn't we engage with women and girls in the way that we are now? So from that point of view, the budgets are tough. It's going to be hard to compete, but we're never going to spend the kind of money. Even if Premier League TV rights go up, we'll only go up in proportion to what we consider is sustainable for our club. It's very, very easy to overspend on player salaries and transfer budgets, but we're very determined not to do that.
I really have a mic. Touching on esports, it's been mentioned quite a lot. You mentioned you were looking at recruiting your first esports athlete.
Are you good?
I used to be, not anymore. What platform will that be on? Is that a FIFA player you're looking to recruit?
Yeah,
and then long term, will you have aims to recruit other esports athletes from other titles?
I think so. I think initially, obviously, on the FIFA platform, because it's the EA Sports platform that the Premier League will be basing Premier League on. But there's no reason why that couldn't develop from our point of view across other platforms or even other games. This is our first toe in the water. We kind of understand football. So to have an e-gamer that's a football-based e-gamer sort of makes sense. It's quite different. Where we go after that, I think, really depends on the success of what kind of engagement we get and whether we can actually use this to leverage more commercial assets, new revenues, new opportunities to engage with different fans at different levels, different age groups. It's quite exciting, but we're a little bit like the blind leading the blind. To be honest, it's a toe in the water for us. It's exciting, but it's also a little bit scary because I wandered into the stadium the other day to see some of the kids that like to participate, and I literally thought it was a store party that had come to visit the stadium for a tour. But some of these guys are genuinely top e-gamers that go off around the world competing for prize money and other assets. It's incredible. We're engaging it. It's new, but it's exciting.
One final question up front.
Thank you. Quick question. You said you have a 5 million budget for the academy per year, right? So I was wondering how much of this budget, or in general, what's the role of technology nowadays in the academy to predict what kind of kid or player can then become a player for Premier League, and how this can impact actually the saving of money in the player transfer to then go directly with your own product to Premier League?
I wish it was that easy. If I had a little bit of software that told me every kid that came into the academy was either going to be a great footballer like Messi or not, it would be wonderful. I mean, the reality is we use technology in a lot of different ways, particularly around monitoring young players' development, not just physically but emotionally and also technically. And those three things are the biggest measures of academy footballers. You could have a boy that's growing slowly and therefore doesn't look such a great player, but technically is very gifted, or you could have a kid that's growing really, really fast who looks very dominant because he's so much bigger than every other kid of his age group, but technically he's not so good. So we tend to use technology as a way of tracking players. There's a lot of stuff in football that's written about if you're born before Christmas, you're more likely to be a professional athlete than not. Again, our statistics don't show that that's necessarily true. You don't have to be 6 foot tall. Lionel Messi proves that. You don't have to be the quickest to be the best professional footballer. Usain Bolt proves that. So from that point of view, there are lots of different physical, technical, emotional attributes that we're monitoring, and we use technology really to support the process of evaluating players. But unfortunately, there's no algorithm out there that tells us which is going to be the best footballer that comes in. I wish there was.
I know there are some more questions, but I'm going to bring us to a close. But hopefully, of course, not flashing off, and hopefully, so